Hi, welcome back to Figuring Out the Bible. This is episode 4. Today we're talking about Genesis chapter 4, Cain and Abel. Not my favorite story, but definitely an important one to know. Quick disclaimer, this is not for educational purposes. This is just me reading through and giving my general ideas, thoughts, and theories on what's going on in each section. This, like I said, this is not for educational purposes. This is just for me to get the word out there and to really figure out where I stand on a lot of this stuff. So without further ado, let's get into it. Like I said, we're starting at Genesis chapter 4. Now Adam knew his wife, and she conceived and bore Cain, saying, I have gotten a man with the help of the Lord. Because the name Cain is quite similar to the word, the Hebrew word for to get or to acquire. And again, she bore his brother Abel. Now Abel was a keeper of sheep, and Cain a worker of the ground. In the course of time, Cain brought to the Lord an offering of the fruit of the ground, and Abel also brought of the firstborn of his flock and of their fat portions. And the Lord had regard for Abel and his offering, but Cain and his offering he had no regard. So Cain was very angry, and his face fell. The Lord said to Cain, Why are you angry, and why is your face fallen? If you do well, will you not be accepted? And if you do not do well, sin is crouching at the door. Its desire is for you, but you must rule over it. Cain spoke to Abel his brother, and when they were in the field, Cain rose up against his brother Abel and killed him. Then the Lord said to Cain, Where is Abel, your brother? He said, I don't know. Am I my brother's keeper? And the Lord said, What have you done? The voice of your brother's blood is crying to me from the ground. And now you are cursed from the ground, which has opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. When you work the ground, it shall no longer yield to you its strength. You shall be a fugitive and a wanderer on earth. Whew! Cain said to the Lord, My punishment is greater than I can bear. Behold, you have driven me today away from the ground, and from your face I shall be hidden, and I shall be a fugitive and a wanderer on the earth, and whoever finds me will kill me. Then the Lord said to him, Not so. If anyone kills Cain, vengeance shall be taken on him sevenfold. And the Lord put a mark on Cain, lest anyone who found him should attack him. Then Cain went away from the presence of the Lord and settled in the land of Nod, east of Eden. Cain knew his wife, and she conceived and bore Enoch. When he built a city, he called the name of the city after the name of his son, Enoch. To Enoch was born Irad, and Irad fathered Mehujael. Mehujael fathered Methushael. Methushael fathered Lamech. Lamech took 2 wives. The name of one was Ada, and the name of the other Zillah. Ada bore Jabal. He was the father of those who dwell in tents and have livestock. His brother's name was Jubal. He was the father of those who play the lyre and the pipe. Zillah also bore Tubal-Cain. He was the forger of all instruments of bronze and iron. The sister of Tubal-Cain was Naamah, which, by the way, is such a beautiful name. Lamech said to his wives, Ada and Zillah, hear my voice. You wives of Lamech, listen to what I say. I have killed a man for wounding me, a young man for striking me. If Cain's revenge is sevenfold, then Lamech's is 77-fold. Ugh. Not a very nice guy. And Adam knew his wife again, and she bore a son, and called his name Seth. For she said, God has appointed for me another offspring instead of Abel, for Cain killed him. To Seth also a son was born, and he called his name Enosh. At that time, people began to call upon the name of the Lord. It's a great way to end that chapter. So, the first thing that we have to ask ourselves is, why was Cain's offering rejected where Abel's was accepted? The reasoning behind it is rather subtle, but prominent if you really think about it. So first, let's look at Abel's offering. Abel brought some of the firstborn and their fat portions for God. So that's kind of significant. The firstborn is always... The firstborn is significant, okay? When it comes to firstborn sons, they get the inheritance. When it comes to the firstborn of the flock, those are the more special ones. The fast forward to Leviticus, and you see that a lot of the sacrifices require firstborns or first fruits. So keep that in mind. That's why Abel, his offering was accepted. Cain, however, he just brought some of the fruits that he had grown. So just bringing some of it isn't showing the same level of gratitude, respect, reverence for God that Abel had, bringing the firstborn. If Cain had brought the very first fruits that he grew from the ground, that would have been probably different. His offering probably would have been accepted. Also, keep in mind that Cain was the firstborn himself, so he was, in some sense, held to a higher standard than Abel, and yet he performed to a much lower standard. So, it's pretty clear why God rejected Cain's offering, which, of course, that made Cain mad. That's why his face fell, and then we get God telling Cain this statement: "Why are you angry, and why has your face fallen? If you do well, will you not be accepted, like Abel? And if you do not do well," which he didn't, "sin is crouching at the door." If you don't do good, you're doing evil. It's pretty black and white, honestly. Its desire is for you, but you must rule over it. Now, I want you to notice the clear connection between that statement and what God tells Eve in the garden when his punishment is being issued. It says, "Your desire shall be for your husband, and he shall rule over you." Okay, so we are supposed to rule over our sin in the same way that a husband rules over his wife. We are supposed to control our sin, to lead it, to have control over our sin, not the other way around. So that's a really interesting connection that I noticed. And then Cain and Abel go out into the field. Cain kills him out of jealousy and anger over the whole offering thing. And then there's another tie-in to Genesis chapter 3, where after Cain kills Abel, God comes to him and says, "Where is Abel, your brother?" Okay, so that's a clear tie-in to Genesis chapter 2, where God comes to the garden and asks Adam, "Where are you?" It's a clear connection there. And then Cain, he says, "How should I know? Am I my brother's keeper?" basically saying, I don't care. Not my deal. Not my problem. Um, so in response to God asking Adam and Eve, where are you? They say, we're here. We hid because we realized we were naked. We ate the fruit. They confessed and repented. Cain, on the other hand, he doesn't do either. He doesn't confess to his sins at any point. He says, I don't know. Am I my brother's keeper? He literally rejects the entire idea that he had anything to do with Abel going missing. And the Lord, of course, immediately knew what the deal was. So that's why he says, what have you done? The voice of your brother's blood is crying to me from the ground, and now you are cursed from the ground, and all that. Notice, in this case, God actually does curse Cain. He didn't curse Adam and Eve. He cursed the serpent. He cursed the ground. Now he has cursed Cain because he committed such a great sin, but then showed no remorse, no repentance, didn't even confess, like nothing. So he actually did get cursed pretty harshly, if you ask me. So he gets sent out, and he's forced to wander the world and to be a fugitive. So he doesn't get to go home. He doesn't get to be with his people. He doesn't get to be with God. Doesn't get to be in his homeland. Nothing. He's just it's basically, he's told, get out and stay gone. But this is Cain's response. And notice how selfish it is. After God issues the punishment, Cain responds with, my punishment is greater than I can bear. Tell that to Abel. Behold, you have driven me today away from the ground, and away from your face I shall be hidden. I shall be a fugitive and a wanderer on the earth. And here's the interesting statement. And whoever finds me will kill me. He's actively worried about other people finding him, which tells me that the notion of Adam and Eve not being the first humans, maybe the first modern day Homo sapiens, but not the first humans, that verifies it. There had to have been other people outside of the biblical narrative at that time. Otherwise, Cain wouldn't have said, whoever finds me will kill me. He would have said, if my family finds me, they'll kill me. Or if my father finds me, he'll kill me. Something like that, So just keep that. So just a little thing that I noticed. Doesn't really make a difference either way. And then God tells him, no, if anyone kills you, I will take vengeance on them sevenfold. Then that's where the mark of Cain comes in. And after that, Cain sets out, settles in the land of Nod, which is east of Eden, so probably like somewhere over in Iraq, I think, that general region. And then, again, Cain found himself a wife, had to have been outside the family, or outside of his, outside of that the area he was in initially, because it says he set out and then he knew his wife. Given it doesn't say that he married his wife after he set out, but she's not mentioned before that, so it's could be either way. Honestly, doesn't matter. Cain knew his wife. She bore Enoch, and then they built then Cain built a city, called it Enoch after his son. And then fast forward a couple generations, and we get to Lamech, who is the first one in the entire Bible to take on 2 wives. So polygamy is officially in the group chat. And then Lamech's Um, Lamech's wife Ada bore Jabal, the father of those who dwell in tents and have livestock. His brother Jubal was the father of those who play the lyre and the pipe. So it's like the father of shepherds, essentially, and the father of musicians, so to speak. Kind of interesting. And then Naamah was Zillah. Sorry, going back. Lamech's wife Zillah bore him Tubal Cain, and he was the forger of all instruments of bronze and iron, so like tools and that sort of thing, I think. Tubal Cain's sister was Naamah. Such a pretty name. Anyways, this is where Lamech's nastiness and evil and the corruption of Cain's bloodline really becomes prominent. Verses 23 and 24, Lamech says to his wives, Ada and Zillah, hear my voice. You wives of Lamech, listen to what I say. So he's literally telling them, listen, I'm bragging. I have killed a man for wounding me, a young man for striking me. He's literally bragging to his wives about killing a guy because the guy went after him. And then 24 really paints the picture that they misunderstood the mark of Cain and the punishment that would be a result from killing Cain. 24. If Cain's revenge is sevenfold, then Lamech's is 77-fold. Okay, so right there we're seeing Lamech thinks that the sevenfold revenge that is put on Cain is actually Cain getting the revenge, but it's not. It was saying God meant that if anyone kills Cain, that God would get revenge on that person sevenfold. But Lamech is twisting it and saying, you did this to me, I will get vengeance on you 77-fold. So for Cain, the vengeance was coming from God. For Lamech, the vengeance is coming from him. Man cannot have true justice and vengeance. That is not how it works. Only God can do that. We do not have the moral acuity to have. We can't do that, okay? Us humans, we don't have the capacity for vengeance, for just vengeance, I should say. That's something that God reserves only for himself. Now, going back to Adam and Eve, it says, Adam knew his wife again, and she bore a son and called his name Seth. For she said, God has appointed for me another offspring instead of Abel, for Cain killed him. So when it comes to Seth, I'm pretty sure his Seth sounds like the Hebrew for he appointed. So there you go. Seth, he appointed, God has appointed a new son. There you go. And then it goes on, to Seth also a son was born, and he called his name Enosh. And we'll get to see more of him later. Think about this for a second. Cain went to the land of Nod, had his two wives, and then kept wandering, assumedly. Abel was killed, so Seth, the third son, is actually the one who became the father of the Abrahamic bloodline. So Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, the whole Hebrew nation, Moses, all the way up through Jesus, all of them came from Seth, the third son of Adam and Eve. And then the very last line of chapter 4 is quite interesting. We get to see that it says, at that time, people began to call upon the name of the Lord. To me,
that sounds like that's when people started properly worshiping God and praying like we do today. So if you so they gave him offerings before, of course. We've talked about that in depth. But they also it was a very informal form of worship. And then to say someone was calling upon the name of the Lord, that's the kind of phrasing people like to use a lot for people begin to pray. I was praying, I was calling upon the name of the Lord. So I do believe that at the end of chapter 4, that's when our proper worship and prayer came into being. So that's a really cool thing to end such a dark chapter on. Is and this is when we started really praying and worshiping God. It's like awesome. I love that. Anyways, that's all I've got for you today. I hope you enjoyed. If you have any thoughts, comments, or questions, drop them down below. I'd love to hear from you. I am happy to answer anything that you ask to the best of my ability, of course. I'm not perfect, you know. Odds are my answers won't be all that helpful, but I'll do my best. Anyways, thank you for joining me, and I hope to see you next time. Adios.